All right, so Victoria's solar feed-in tariff, right?
Mm.
Big changes coming, and we're going to break it all down, dive deep into the premium feed-in tariff, PFIT, and what its sunset November 1st, 2024 really means for you.
It's a huge shift. Yeah, let's make sure everyone's got all the info.
Exactly. Maybe to get us started, let's rewind a bit. What was the PFIT, and why was it such a big deal when it first came out?
Well, back in 2009, solar panels, they were a pretty big investment, not nearly as common as they are now, right? PFIT, it was designed to encourage people to jump in, guaranteed a minimum 60 cents per kilowatt hour credit for that solar energy you fed back to the grid.
60 cents. Wow, that's a pretty sweet deal.
Oh yeah, it was. Some limits, of course.
Yeah.
Like a 5 kilowatt system cap, and they closed it to new applicants back in 2011.
Right, so really about boosting those early birds. But makes you wonder, why is this super generous PFIT ending now?
Well, for one thing, the legislation had that built-in end date. But bigger picture, solar's totally different now than in 2009. Technology's more efficient, cheaper, and daytime energy prices, when your panels are humming, they're way lower.
Makes sense. Not so much about the PFIT failing, but the energy world changing around it, yeah.
Exactly. Plus, got to think about the non-solar folks. They were basically subsidizing those PFIT rates through their own tariffs. As solar gets more and more common, got to make the system fair for everyone, right?
Equity, I like that. But what about those of us who signed up way back when? Our contracts are still good, right?
Absolutely, yeah.
Oh.
Existing PFIT contract, you're golden. Those will be honored right up to November 1st, 2024, as promised.
Okay, good to know, good to know. For those of us who joined the solar party a bit later or thinking about it now, what's the deal after the PFIT? Are we going to be left out in the cold?
Not at all, no way. After November 1st, 2024, solar customers will transition to the minimum feed-in tariffs. Those are set by the Essential Services Commission, or ESC for short.
The ESC, tell me a little bit more about them. What do they actually do?
Think of them like the referees of the energy market, right? They set minimum feed-in tariffs every year to keep things fair. They look at all sorts of factors like wholesale electricity prices, grid stability when they decide on these rates.
Okay, starting to get the picture, but gotta admit, wholesale electricity prices, that always sounds a bit, I don't know. Can you break that down? How does that actually affect my bill?
Yeah, no worries. Wholesale electricity prices might sound kind of jargony, but it's pretty simple. It's basically the price that energy retailers, they pay for electricity before they sell it on to you. And just like anything else, when those wholesale prices drop, like they do when solar's pumping out energy during the day, the price you pay can go down too.
Interesting. So the ESC is looking at these big market trends when they're setting these minimum feed-in tariffs. But are we stuck with whatever they decide? What about a little competition between these energy companies?
Oh, you're right. Competition is good. Retailers, they can and often do offer more than that minimum set by the ESC. So it's always a good idea to shop around, see what deals are out there, especially as we get closer to November.
I do like having options, but let's be real. Those minimum feed-in tariffs probably not going to be as generous as the PFIT, right?
You're right. Likely to be lower than that sweet PFIT rate. But there's a bright side here. Remember how we talked about solar tech, how much it's improved?
Yeah.
Yeah. Today's solar panels are way more efficient, more electricity from the same sunlight. So even if the rate for what you feed back is a bit lower, you're making more in the first place.
Good point. Hadn't thought of it like that. But then there's the whole using it part. What about when the sun's down, like nighttime?
That's where it gets really interesting. Battery storage. It's like a savings account for your solar energy. You store the extra your panels make during the day and boom, use it later when you need it.
Instead of buying from the grid at peak times. Love it. Aren't home batteries still crazy expensive, though?
They can be a decent chunk of change, yeah, but getting cheaper all the time. And Solar Victoria has some great rebates incentives, especially for systems over 10 years old.
Hold on. Rebates for older systems. Now you're talking my language. Tell me more about these Solar Victoria rebates.
Oh, they've got a bunch. Rebates for new, more efficient panels, rebates for solar hot water systems, even loans for battery storage. Makes going solar or upgrading way easier on the wallet.
Whoa, okay, lots to unpack there. Let's get specific. I'm sure people listening are wondering what this all means for them. Like, what if I want to add more solar panels to my roof? Do I lose my PFIT doing that?
Good question. Unfortunately, yeah, adding panels, even if you're still under that 5 kilowatt limit, means losing the PFIT.
Ah, bummer. So it's not about the total size, more about when you signed up.
Right. It was about getting those early adopters on board, and those contracts, they're solid. But hey, adding panels could be the perfect time to upgrade to a newer, better system, right? Take advantage of those Solar Victoria rebates we talked about.
Turning lemons into lemonade, I like it. What about if I just need to replace a few panels? Rogue Frisbee met an untimely end on my roof.
Frisbees, the solar panel's nemesis. As long as you're replacing with the same capacity, so not increasing your system's total power, you're good. Your PFIT stays put.
Makes sense. Gotta admit, though, this whole net metering thing, still a bit fuzzy on that. How does that work into all this?
Ah, net metering, right. Think of it like a budget, but with energy instead of dollars. You want to balance out what your panels generate with what you use in your home.
Hmm.
So if you're making more than you're using, that extra gets sent back to the grid.
Okay, so replacing a few panels here and there shouldn't mess that balance up too much. But what about a bigger change? Like, what if I'm doing a major renovation, adding a second story to my house? What happens to my solar and the PFIT then?
It's actually pretty similar to replacing panels. If you reinstall the same panels after the renovation and your system's capacity stays the same, your PFIT is safe.
So even a big reno doesn't mean I have to start from scratch with the solar. That's good to know, although I'm guessing paperwork's involved.
Oh, you know it. Never hurts to double check with your distributor, make sure everything's documented right. But PFIT-wise, you're golden as long as you're not upping that system capacity.
Paperwork, the joys of homeownership, am I right? Okay, speaking of big changes, what if I'm selling my place? Does my PFIT come along with me?
Now, this is interesting. The PFIT, it's actually tied to the property, not the owner. So you sell your house, the lucky new owners, they get to enjoy that premium rate for the rest of the program. Nice bonus for them and a great selling point for you.
That's a good one. Hadn't thought of that. Built-in perk for the buyers. All right, last scenario. Let's say I'm ready to go all in on this whole renewable energy thing and add a battery system to my setup. Does that mess with my PFIT agreement at all?
Nope, not at all. Adding a battery to your existing system won't affect your PFIT eligibility as long as everything else in your contract is still hunky-dory.
So adding a battery is a good way to future-proof my setup while still making the most of those PFIT benefits. Makes sense. This has been incredibly helpful. Any big takeaways you want listeners to remember?
Big one. Don't freak out. Just because the PFIT's ending doesn't mean the end of solar savings. It's an exciting time for solar energy. Technology keeps getting better, cheaper, and there are more options than ever.
You're right. It's all about adapting, going with the flow, right? We talked about some great resources today, Solar Victoria, energy retailers. Any last bits of advice for listeners as they navigate this new energy world?
Yeah, do your homework. Figure out what works best for you, your situation, your budget. Upgrading your system, getting a battery, or even just learning more, there's help out there.
Knowledge is power, as they say. And on that note, we'll wrap up this deep dive into the world of solar. Remember, the future of energy is bright, and you can be a part of it. Until next time, keep exploring those possibilities.